words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. The gospel story today, in my way of thinking, is obviously about mental illness and the healing power of a loving God. But it's also about demonic possession, so buckle up. A long time ago, I borrowed a book from the library at Christ Episcopal Church. It was about 100 pages or so, and it had a really interesting cover. There was a drawing of a man sitting under a tree playing the flute. And I don't remember the title, but I was really drawn by the illustration. So I began to read it. And it took me a while to realize what it was about. But I was about 10 pages in, and I realized I was reading someone's imaginative story about what happened to the Gerasene demoniac, the man we just read about. It was a story about what happened after he had been freed from the demons. And just so you know, I think this is a great idea. I think we need lots more books about what happened the day after. We have too much left unknown. So this was about what happened afterwards. And in the stroke of genius on the author's part in the book, the man's name was Martin. He was a Gentile. And he was described as a thoughtful, lonely, educated, intelligent man, a musician. And he was the one who was drawn sitting under the tree on the cover. Well, when I was writing this sermon, I tried to go back and find the book to make sure I had all my facts right. But either I didn't return it, which means it's in my house somewhere, or I did return it and I couldn't find it, or it's been discarded. Like I said, it was a long time ago that I read this. But I realized I didn't really need it. The book made a huge impression on me. Because Martin, restored to his true self, does return home. He tries to resume living his life with the other people in the Gentile cities. In that part of the country, it was called the Decapolis. There were 10 cities of various sizes around there, but it was all Gentile. And he was doing his best to tell them what had happened to him, describing what it was like and how he had been cleaned and restored. But eventually, he realized he couldn't keep doing that. So he rejoins Jesus and Mary Magdalene on their journey. And in the book, he's there when Jesus is crucified and resurrected. The book ends with him setting back out on the road, now knowing more about what his purpose is, to proclaim the good news of healing to the Gentiles, way ahead of Paul. And that's where the book ends. It's great. It's a great book. I hope I can find it. It's a beautiful story. And it's told from the point of a Gentile trying to figure out what had happened to him. And he clearly understood what Jesus had done to and for him, and that he now had a purpose and a way to pay it back. But let's get back to today's story, when he was not Martin, but instead Legion. In the Synoptic Gospels, the ones with Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they all tell roughly this same story, and they all place it roughly in the same sequence of other events in Jesus' life. And if you've read the three Gospels, you realize that doesn't happen very often. They don't always agree. And in one of them, there's two people. In one of them, it's longer. One of them, it's the one we read today. But in general, it holds together. And in general, that tells me this was an important lesson here that they wanted us to keep. So here's the arc. We came in kind of in the middle. The previous night, before this part of the story, Jesus and his students were rowing and sailing across the Sea of Galilee. And a terrible thunderstorm has come up. And Jesus is sleeping through it. You guys remember this part? And they wake him up in fear for their lives. And he rebukes the wind and the rain, and everything becomes calm. He calms the tempest. Well, this is now that morning. So in the morning, they've landed the small boat that they were in on the beach, and Jesus steps out of the boat. The man runs down to the beach, naked, screaming at the top of his lungs, and you tell he's covered in scars. Horrible. And we learned a little bit in Luke, if you read the others, you'll be able to fill in more of the details, that the man has long been possessed by demons. And for many years, many things have happened to him. We learn that to protect themselves from him, his neighbors have tried many times to bind him in iron chains, but every time he twists the chains apart, it breaks them. And we learn to protect themselves even further. His neighbors have often bound his wrists together and his ankles together in iron shackles, but every time he has broken them and escaped. We learn that the demons have driven him out of the city to live alone, tormented, exiled to the desolate, abandoned, foul-smelling burial tombs that are outside of town. He's alone. And we learn that the demons make him chase and challenge and scream at everyone who comes near. He chases them away. And they've become so fearful of his violent fury and strength and shouting and yelling that none pass that way anymore. He's tried to break free, but he cannot. He's cut off all of his clothes. He's cut himself over and over with stones to force the demons to leave, but they have a firm grip on him. So, when Jesus steps out of the boat onto the sand, he sees Jesus, and he knows what Jesus is. The demons know. And their fear bubbles up and it boils over. And he runs full tilt, waving and screaming down to the beach to confront him. And there's Jesus. Everyone around him is running away, trying to hide from this crazy man, cowering in fear. But Jesus is calm, direct, steely-eyed, in face of all of that froth and rage. And Jesus asks him for his name. "What do you call yourself?" he asks. The man himself doesn't answer. He can't answer. But instead, the other beings within him answer for him. "We are legion." The readers of the gospel know that that word represents a huge number, over 5,000. There are over 5,000 demons battling within this poor man. What's interesting, startling, and makes you want to read it again and again, is how few sentences it takes between when he says, "I am legion," and then he is transformed. It takes almost no time between the howling band of demons declaring, "We are legion," and then we see the man again, seated, clothed, dressed, in his right mind. And all three Gospels say it that way. Clothed, dressed, in his right mind. In a few short sentences, his tempest has been calmed. And that's the thread. That's the thread that we're supposed to get through this story that Mark, Matthew, and Luke have tried so hard and carefully weave for us. That we are afraid for our lives. We're afraid of the rain, we're afraid of the wind, we're afraid of drowning, we're tormented by demons, we're afraid of our own minds and bodies. And then there is Jesus, standing there, calmly. He knows us, he loves us, he is alongside us, he is inside us, and he is outside us all at once. And he calms that tempest. Remember, too, in the book that this person wrote, what they did with Martin. Martin sees the death of Jesus on the cross. And he understands, perhaps more better than anybody, that this is the third tempest, the one that we and the world make together, that keeps us from God. Martin understands better than anyone that Jesus' death is calming that tempest. And Martin understands better than anyone Jesus' resurrection is proof that that tempest has been calmed forever. So how do we apply this? How do we apply this in our own lives? Something that happened like this so long ago. Because there's one thing in that story that gives me a little room for pause. I'm not quite sure how to deal with it. The demon possession thing. 2,000 years ago, they wrote about this fairly often. But no matter what Hollywood wants us to believe, we don't see that much demon possession anymore. Or do we? I have a friend. He has 2 children, and one of them suffers from schizophrenia. He's violent. He pulls his bed apart. He pulls his desk apart. And his little brother has to be careful around him, because his older brother breaks things into pieces for no apparent reason. I have another friend of mine who struggles with dissociative disorders. She hears voices all the time. I think we know lots of people who regret what they've done and they can't let it go. Or they carry a trauma from something that happened to them and they can't quite heal from it. Sounds to me like those are chains. Sounds to me like those are shackles. And what's interesting about Martin's story in the gospel is that the demons were so strong and so able to control him so completely, maybe it's because there were 5,000 of them, that he was able to do humanly impossible things. He could break iron chains by himself. He could crack open the iron shackles. He could survive being cut by stones. Things we can't explain. Things that were so unusual. It was clear something very, very powerful had a hold of him. Something outside his control. What about us when we have these chains and shackles of our own? So I think though we are bound by chains and shackles, they're invisible. But all the same, we cannot easily break them on our own. In our own time, I think the demons have made the chains and shackles break-proof. They don't want us to break them. And we're not easily to break them without help. You guys know that in my personal ministry, it is to be with people who have hidden chains and shackles, and sometimes not so hidden chains and shackles. And I've promised myself to look them in the eye, to stay with them if they ask me to, and to help where I can, but most importantly, to never leave them alone. I've promised that. Someone once said to me that I shouldn't work any harder at this than they do, that these people have to put in the work to fix their own issues. I get it. There's boundaries, there's limits. And those boundaries and limits are there for a reason. And I've also learned, I've got my own scars in this, as you guys know, that if I'm not careful, sometimes through ego and pride, I keep them from working on their chains. So that if by accident they don't wind up going through prayer or medical treatment or psychotherapy of some kind, nothing changes. And I've actually harmed them, when all I really wanted to do was to let them know they're not alone. So I'm going to stick to that part. As the band Mumford and Sons said, we are not alone in this. We need to help each other, find the strength to face things as they are. And in our gospel story, and in many others like it, it's clearly pointed out that we have to take the first step and bring our problems to God. Think about it. What would have happened if Martin had not rushed down to the beach and challenged Jesus? You know what would have happened? Nothing. Nothing would have happened to free him. He would still be Legion. He had to take the first step. That was a weird first step, but he had to take the first step. All right, who's read The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis? Anybody out there? All right, cool, great. In that book, another very quick read, a demon-possessed artist is confronted and asked by an angel of God, do you want me to use this flaming sword to cut that demon out of you? And it's gonna hurt. Well, the artist must choose. Now the demon, in fear of the flaming sword, tries to convince the artist that without him, the artist can't be created, that the demon has always been the source of the artist's creative power, and without him, he's nothing. And the artist worries about that. He's always been a little worried about that. But he screws up his courage and pleads with the angel and says, yes, do it, but do it quickly. And the angel smites the demon, and the artist survives, and the demon itself is transformed into a horse, and they ride off into the fields of God. The artist had to choose. God took care of the rest. God is there and ready. But we must help each other take that first step. It's a hard first step to take. We must seek healing. And we have to tell the truth. When Jesus asks us our name, we must say it, warts and all. Forgive me, Lord. I am a sinner. I am Legion. And then we must take our medicine. We must do the work. We must amend our lives with God's help. My brothers and sisters, in today's readings, Jesus has responded to our fears and he has calmed our tempests. He has done it many, many times. You know this better than I do in your own lives. He will keep doing it as often as we ask.